Information in regards to Japanese tattooing comes from the Horiyoshi families. They've had the most stuff published on them in America, and therefore they're probably the main source of information in that regards. There's a common misconception because there's two different ones. There's one in Tokyo, and then there's one in Yokohama.
Check this out.
Completely two different families. Horiyoshi III is probably the most well-known Japanese tattooer in the world currently because he's living and he's very, very prolific. And he's done hundreds and hundreds of bodysuits, and he's had numerous books published on himself. The Tokyo Horiyoshi, on the other hand, has 2 books in his name called Horiyoshi's World, published in the 80s, I believe. He is most commonly regarded in American circles as the greatest tattooer that ever lived. He has a direct lineage through his father to the ukiyo-e woodblock artist named Kuniyoshi. The most accessible one was Horiyoshi III. I've published numerous books in English that were very accessible. They sold them at Barnes and Nobles, and they were very informative, you know, about tattoo motif and tattoo tradition in general. They were very educational. He's a very, very interesting man too. He's a historian in himself, you know. He's like a wealth of knowledge, and he has a very interesting lineage of he tattooed pre-tattoo machine, and then he tattooed post-tattoo machine, and you can see in his artwork how it evolved. The coolest dude ever. I've actually had the privilege of meeting him. I got tattooed by him 5 years ago. Really amazing experience. He's super funny, engaging, charming guy. Amazing artist in the sense of like how much artwork he actually creates, and how his generosity with information in terms of like the public, you know, because there's some, I don't know what it is, but sometimes there's a hesitation with giving information to people too flagrantly, you know. He, on the other hand, has been like very generous with sharing information with the Western culture, you know. He has a book called Bushido that was published. It was the first one that I ever read. It's a small book that is mostly documenting tattoos, but it also has like excerpts of text, you know. That was written and developed with Horiyoshi in coordination with the State of Grace people, Horitaka in particular. Those books are amazing. There's another one, The Floating World, and it goes into the myth and how like the thematic motifs in tattooing are directly connected to the ukiyo-e period of art and the Edo period. Very engaging. I believe it was a very important piece in terms of tattoo history. That was a great contribution. Horiyoshi II, or Coronuma from Tokyo, he probably is my absolute favorite tattooer just because his tattoos have like a sophistication and refinement to them that I think most people would agree it isn't very, there's few people who attained it, you know, and he attained it at a period of time when tattoos was kind of thought to be primitive, and in a sense a lot of the methods that they used still to this day are looked at as being primitive, being that they use hand tools as opposed to electric tattooing. You can also see, like in his body of work, that even though it's small, that there is an evolution involving the introduction of the electric tattoo machine and the line work. Most interesting is the way his compositions are set up, because they're very influenced by the no theater plays. So, because his father was, as well as being a tattooer, as I understand it, was like also a person who drew the actors and whatnot. So most notably, what you can see in his tattoos as far as like influence today is like his backgrounds have a sense of like they're very small isometric bars that formulate the currents of wind and the currents of the water and the flow in general with the anatomy of the body. It kind of defines a region of Japan and in a sense of Tokyo. So that's kind of something you'll see as opposed to like Osaka's more bold and open kind of backgrounds, which is an interesting topic. You know. There's kind of like a history between, if you read the books involving Sailor Jerry, in which his correspondence with other tattooers, He references Mr. Coronuma a bunch because he would kind of see occasionally like either photos or pictures of, or people would come in who might have a tattoo from him on his back, and there were always these kind of rumors where it was kind of like seemed like it was in agreement that all the American tattooers held him in reverence, as being like the greatest living tattooer. And then when Ed went to Gifu with Mr. Horiyoshi, that kind of got a foothold into Japan. And when he went back in the 80s, I believe that in some way, shape, or form, it was to seek out Mr. Coronuma. Mr. Coronuma actually came to the San Francisco in the 1980s, I believe, to a tattoo convention, and that was like the only time that he's ever been really like associated with the greater tattoo population, because he was kind of isolated, which is really fascinating because he's like had that much of an impact. And he's kind of unique because his father, in agreement to teaching him, made him promise that he wouldn't get tattooed at all, which is really interesting because a lot of tattooers gain that perspective by getting tattooed themselves. So he had 0 tattoos, but they actually talk about it in the book how he had to like gain the regard for what a person's going through without actually experiencing it himself. And what a difficult task that was for him. It was like it put him at a disadvantage. And I think that was sort of intentional, because like his father agreed to teach him on the basis that he was not going to like play favorites with him, which is kind of a Japanese thing to do, just like, no, I'm going to hold you to the highest fucking standard. It means I'm going to put you at a disadvantage a little bit. I kind of like the stories like that, no exception. You're going to be the best or nothing at all,